the new administration. I have a few announcements and etiquette to go through. First of all, may I remind everyone present that this meeting will be live streamed and recorded by the internet, and this recording is archived for future viewing. Participants mute themselves when not speaking in order to avoid any background noise or feedback when other participants are speaking. If a committee member wishes to speak, can they please put their hand up if they can be seen on screen, or use the hand up option on the application. Difficulty hearing or being heard, then they should let myself or the Democratic Service Officer know as soon as possible. If you have a webcam, you should try turning that off in order to help broadband or Wi-Fi bandwidth, so at least you can still hear and be heard.
Turn it off. I know it's out.
If required, participants can dial into the meeting, use a telephone. Telephone number is provided on the invite. If for any technical reason any person party to the proceedings is unable to hear, then the hearing will be adjourned for a short time to allow contact to be made. It's important to remember that all parties must hear all the proceedings unless they themselves decide to leave. If you miss any of the proceedings, then as councillors you can't vote. Please ensure that all debate is raised verbally and not via the chat function for the sake of the recording. The chat function may be used to highlight any technical issues and or grab the attention of the chair or Democratic Services Officer only. The allocated public speaking minutes will be strictly adhered to. So, welcome again, everyone, to the to this council meeting. I'm pleased to see that all councillors on the committee have attended the planning training, making them eligible to attend, and we should all be okay, therefore, with the rules and so on of planning. I'd remind you, it is a quasi-judicial committee, and all decisions must be based on good planning grounds and not on personal preferences. It's please. We all received an email from Debbie Miles, the monitoring officer, this morning about whipping. For those who haven't seen this yet, basically political whipping is prejudging the issue, and the meat of it, which I'll read to you now when I can get to it. Sorry, bear with me. I have so many bits of paper.
Just to say, Chair, as well, I think Councillor Cowper did have her hand up at one point, so I just want to check. Councillor Cowper, is everything okay now, or did you have a question?
No, everything's fine. I was getting a lot of feedback, but Councillor Thomas did ask everyone to turn off the microphone. That's all it was. Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Cowper, we had a few sound problems then. Could you just repeat what you said then? Apologies.
Oh, no, I'd put my hand up because I was getting a lot of feedback, but Councillor Thomas did ask everyone to turn off the microphones. I'm getting feedback on my feed here.
Yeah. Well, hopefully that won't be an issue all through. But okay. If you keep your microphone turned off, except for when it's speaking, that should resolve that for you. That gave me the opportunity to find the bit. Basically, it's talking about the party whip. If a member of a scrutiny committee is subject to a party whip in respect of an issue to be considered by it, that member must declare the existence of the whip and the nature of it before the commencement of deliberations on the matter. The declaration and the detail of the whipping arrangements shall be recorded in the minutes of the meeting. So effectively, if there is a party whip going on, then you need to tell us. Right, carrying on with the meeting. First of all, I think we start with apologies for absence.
I've not had any through, Chair.
Right, and I see no indication from anyone about apologies. But in that case, we go on to the minutes of the meeting held on the 27th of April, which you've all had sight of. Can we approve those minutes, please?
Move the minutes, Rhiannon Birch.
Thank you, Rhiannon. Any second?
Second.
Second then. Thank you, Mark. Right, item 3, declarations of interest under the Code of Conduct. Ian.
Thank you, Chair. There's to item 9, 2021-622 FUL and 2021.
Stop for a minute, Chair.
Just check there's a sound issue.
Can you hear me, Marcus? Or I've been getting feedback
I
from
can hear
your.
you,
It's not coming through on here. Come here.
Is it mine?
No, it should be. Oh,
Several of you in the same room, then maybe that might be disturbing it.
I'm after.
the owl has decided to play it.
Okay, to continue, Councillor Thomas, or does Marcus want to sort out his sound problems?
Sorry about this. Can we go ahead?
I can.
Can we do a test? Sorry, could we ask someone to do it just to speak?
Ian, do you want to tell us what you were going to tell us? Please?
I was going to refer to item 9, 2021-622 FUL.
Ian, for some reason we can't hear you.
It's the computer is playing.
Technical issues.
Right, do you want to try again?
Try again, Ian.
Okay, item 9, 2021-622 full.
I can hear you on my headphones. We can't hear you on the. We have a big mic thing on the table here. You can't hear through that. But I can hear you on my headphones.
Try again.
Can everybody else hear me, or is it just an issue in the office that you're sitting?
No, I can hear you.
Yeah.
I
can
can
just
hear
worry about
you.
repeating myself over and over again.
I can hear you clearly.
I can hear you, Ian.
I
wonder if it's too many people close together.
I can hear through this.
Yeah, I can hear through this.
Haven't heard a word Neil Thomas has said so far.
We
You haven't.
We're going to get echo on there. Why is it working for us?
Like you're not recording this and having it live streamed, eh?
Right, can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
I can hear you, Neil.
Right, thank you, Ian. Right.
I'm only concerned that there's just feedback coming back through the fact that Marcus, yourself, and Mark are clearly sat in close proximity, and therefore it's coming back to me, which I think is what Marianne was complaining about earlier.
I think what you're going to have to do is
Speaker. Right, Ian, carry on, please.
Okay, for the third time, Chair. Agenda item 9, planning applications 2021-622 FUL and 2021-1123 FUL relating to respectively 8185 Holton Road, Barry, and the land to the south and west of the Goodsheds Hood Road, Barry. As a local member and as a previous member of this committee, I have participated in discussions and made comments regarding these matters. However, I will be seeing both of those through a fresh pair of eyes at this meeting today and making my decision on that basis.
Sorry, both Councillor Thomas and Councillor Johnson were on mute for the last bits they tried to say there.
Does any of that come through at all? Because I don't know if I was on mute when I was speaking.
Everything you said was fine. There was just one little bit at the very end when you were on mute, and the chair was on mute as well briefly.
I think that was probably, if you're probably lip reading me saying Neil's on mute. And still appears to be.
Right, I'm now off mute. That was fun. Right, Ian Perry now, you have a declaration.
Yes, good afternoon. I'll reappear. Oh, I'm not reappeared. Hang on. I reappeared now. There I am. Okay. Yeah, I've just want to inform you regarding item 9, 2018-01-408 full. About a decade ago, that came up in the LDP, and I made a comment a decade ago in the LDP. It was possibly an objection to change of use of the land allocation housing. I may have subsequently signed a petition. I think that there was a petition going around to get it discussed at the Senate, and I may have signed that. But obviously, the planning applications before us, I've got a fresh pair of eyes and an open mind on it.
Thank you. Any other declarations, please?
Yes, Chairman.
Councillor Ernest.
Yes, Chairman. Agenda item number 9, planning application number 2022-00046 full in respect of 4 Park Road, Penarth. I declare a personal prejudicial interest in that I am known to the applicant, or I know the applicant, and also I have a close relative living in the vicinity of the application site. Thank you.
So you'll withdraw?
I will withdraw.
Thank you.
Or be withdrawn, as the case may be.
Yeah. Right, moving on then. We come to item 4, buildings regs and applications and other building control matters determined by the committee. I think, who's doing this? This is for noting, really. I see no hands up, so we move on to, so that's okay. Move on to item 5, planning applications determined by the head of regeneration under delegated powers. These 2 are for noting. I see no hands up. Item 6, appeals. Who's doing appeals?
Yeah, I will, Chair.
Thank you. Then. Yeah, Ian. Yeah.
Yeah, great. So there's a couple on here. The first one, members may note, it refers to an appeal received and then immediately a decision on it. It relates to a lawful development certificate application in a Berthin, where the applicant was seeking a formal determination that planning permission wasn't required for a development. Because they didn't receive a decision, they appealed non-determination, but subsequently we advised that we were ready to issue a decision, so they withdrew their appeal. So that's why members will see the appeal received and the appeal decision on the same sheet here. The only other one is an appeal decision for Lily Cottage, the butts rear of 10 Westgate, Cowbridge. This was a planning application to convert an existing holiday let into a dwelling, and the appeal was dismissed, and the inspector agreed with us that the dwelling would have been served by an inadequate amount of amenity space to serve the occupiers. Generally speaking, holiday let units can be served by a smaller, more incidental area of space. It's not somebody's main living space. The inspector agreed that for a house there needed to be more space, and the occupiers couldn't just rely on nearby public open space because that serves a different function to someone's private garden. I think that's it, Chair.
Thank you very much. Moving on, item 7, trees. Again, this is for noting. And I see no hands.
Yeah.
So, yeah, thank you, Eddie. Item 8, public rights of way subcommittee membership. I think, Stephen, you were going to talk to this, weren't you?
No, it'd be myself, Chair.
Not me, no.
It'd be me, Chair. It'd be me.
All right. Oh, Mark, sorry. Yeah.
Look, hope everyone can hear me. bear with me. I will just bring up the report. This has been brought for the committee's approval. Bear with me a second. Essentially, we're asking committee to confirm the membership of the Public Rights of Way Subcommittee. Just as a background, appointment of the Public Rights of Way Subcommittee is required for each municipal year. The Public Rights of Way Subcommittee, comprising 5 members, was included in the political balance table, which was used at the annual meeting on the 23rd of May 2022, in terms of the appointment of committees generally. Based on that political balance, the membership of the subcommittee comprised 2 Labour group members, 1 Conservative group member, 1 Plaid group member, and 1 Llantwit Thirst group member. In terms of that, we have named on that membership for Labour, Councillors Drake and Councillors Thomas. Conservative, Councillor Bruce. Plaid, Councillor Hodges. And Llantwit Thirst Independents, Councillor Williams. Essentially, we are looking to confirm the appointment of those 5 positions to the subcommittee by the planning committee. I'm happy to take questions if anyone has any questions on that item.
You should again. Ian, I see you've got your hand. Ian Johnson, I see you've got your hand. I'm going to have to stop saying Ian because there's 2 of you.
there's 2 Ians on the committee and Ian Robinson, so you'll have to be careful as to who you're calling in, Chair.
Ian Johnson.
Can we just move? We note this, Chair.
Yeah. Ian Perry, do you have a question?
Yeah, just a quick one. There's obviously no independent candidate on the subcommittee.
There's no place for independent candidate because of the numbers and the allocation of places on the according to the Nolan rules. Is it Nolan rules? Yeah. Okay.
Right, yeah, obviously there's the same number of independents on the council as there are Llantwit First members.
Yeah, but the allocation doesn't work that way. I mean, that's something you need to take up with Jeff Rees.
No worries.
Councillor Johnson,
yes, just very quickly, Chair. Obviously, the Llantwit First group is comprised as a single group, whereas the independents are standalones and therefore are not subject to the same representation. It's obviously a matter for the independents if they wish to do that and to discuss that with Democratic Services. But I think as I've already moved this is about this is set out in the annual meeting in terms of the representation. So obviously there's only a small number of people there, and that's determined by the numbers of the groups. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah.
Thank you. Right. I'll go on, Mark.
Just to confirm that is correct. What Councillor Johnson has obviously said then, it is based on groups as opposed to individual independent members. So that is what's using the political balance. But obviously if Councillor Perry does have further questions, he can relay those back to Jeff Rees.
Yeah. Right, moving on. Ian Perry, is that a legacy hand then?
It is legacy, sorry.
Yeah. Can I just request at the moment people to be quite diligent about raising and lowering hands because it can confuse me. Right, moving on. I'll second Ian Johnson's proposed movement, and I ask for anybody opposed to indicate now. There are none. In that case, we'll move on. We come now to the item 9, which is the planning applications. The first of these is 2018-01408 FUL, former Cowbridge Comprehensive School, Aberthin Road. I know we have speakers on this. Steve Butler. We also have late reps on this. Or matters arising, I think is the way it's called, which I need to draw to your attention. You'll have had emails on that as well, but I'll ask Steve Butler now, please, to take us away on this, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Hopefully you can all see my screen. Just in relation to those matters arising, so we've had 3 separate notes produced. One, we received 27 additional comments before the cut-off midday yesterday. These continue to raise objections to the application on those grounds which have been previously set out and are set out in the committee report. We also received final comments from the highway engineer following extensive negotiation. So those comments are attached and are pretty much the same as assessed in the committee report. We've also had some additional correspondence from Sarah Pedersen, raising some issues and some points of clarification and a few typographical errors, etc., and just some clarification on some points in reference to plans, etc., in the committee report. So I would urge members to read those matters arising notes which have been circulated in conjunction with the committee report that is in front of you. So can you all see the plan in front of you? Yeah, good. So so the site itself, probably many of you know, is the former Cowbridge Comprehensive sixth form block. So the site itself is located, I'll probably show you the photos, which I think probably be easier. It's located in Aberthin Road. So as you head out of Cowbridge up towards Aberthin, the block is on your left-hand side just before the flyover. So as you can see, I believe it's a late Victorian school. As you can see, it's no longer in use. So a few pictures there from Aberthin Road. So, you know, relatively prominent building with a quite wide frontage. So the site itself, just in terms of site location and a bit of context. So the site is here, which backs onto 1950s, 1960s, largely semi-detached housing, and opposite on the eastern side of Aberthin Road, we've got detached houses located in an elevated position. So the site itself is an allocated site in the LDP and is within the settlement boundary. It's also important to note that the site is not within a conservation area, and there are not any listed buildings, scheduled ancient monuments, or any public rights of way in the vicinity of the site. There are 4 TPO trees, 3 of which are at the back edge of the site, and there's 1 yew tree, which you can just about see there at the front of the site. So in terms of the proposals seek to demolish the existing school and to replace it with 34 affordable units. The building line is slightly forward of the existing school, and it comprises really of 2 main blocks. One is a flatted block, which, if you look at the street scene drawings, they are linked, though it's difficult to see here, by a single-story flat roof section. So it's effectively one building, albeit separated into 2 and linked. So you've got the flatted elements here over 3-story, or some elements are 2.5. Pardon me, my voice is going. And on this side, we've got semi-detached houses. We've got a larger sort of townhouse on the corner with an adjoining smaller scale semi, and then there's another pair of semis. So in terms, again, this is the appearance of the block. Obviously quite prominent gables, etc. And you've got the smaller block here, which is next to flyover with a lower central section. Again, these are the houses. This is the slightly larger townhouse, and then you've got the smaller house types, of which there are 3. So just in terms of the access, just as a point of note, the plan that's in front of you now is the latest plan that's been circulated. This plan is a slightly out-of-date plan, but it was only produced some time ago for the purposes of showing the distances between the flats and the houses and the existing houses. So this plan is the most up-to-date plan. So the scheme proposes to create a new access, and it's assumed that this will be adopted. That will then lead to a parking area to the rear of the site. So the parking will be basically 1 space per unit for the flats, and the parking in front of the houses will be based on 2 space per unit. As part of that, just zoom in a little bit, as part of that layout, there's provision, quite extensive provision for cycle parking. So you've got 12 covered spaces located in the parking area. You've also got a ground floor internal bike storages on each of the flatted blocks. In addition to that, the bin stores will be segregated, and they will be kept in that flat roof link which separates the 2 buildings. That That's all, Chairman. Obviously, there's going to be significant debate on it. So rather than going into the planning merits, I just really wanted to summarise the proposals. Thank you.
Right. Before we go into that, we need to call speakers. I remind the speakers that you will have 3 minutes each, except for Mr. Harries, who will be the last speaker, who gets 6 minutes, as he is for the application. The others are all against. So first up is Mr. Oakley. Can I see you on screen, Mr. Oakley? Are you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I can't actually see you though.
Right. Okay. Can anyone else hear me and see me?
I'm assuming everyone can hear. Right, carry on then. In that case, we'll tell you when your time is up. We'll start timing you when you start speaking. Take it away, Mr. Oakley.
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to speak this afternoon. I'm the Conservation Officer at Save Britain's Heritage, an independent heritage charity with a 40-year track record of campaigning to protect Britain's historic buildings. We receive no government funding, and given our limited resources, we select very carefully the cases we choose to comment on at planning committees or indeed public inquiries. And we believe this application should be refused on the following grounds. First, substantial harm. The total demolition proposed, in our view, would be substantially harmful to the historic character of Cowbridge and the educational heritage of Wales. There's no doubt that, listed or not, the school is an attractive and positive part of the town's heritage and a pioneering example of Wales's drive to provide equal access to education for both boys and girls in the late 19th century. The 5,000 signature petition opposing demolition and the objections of the council's conservation officer, the town council, the Welsh Assembly candidate and local councillor are a clear indication that the school remains a historic asset of both local and national importance. Approving its demolition, especially when alternatives exist, risks reputational damage for the council that does not care for its historic buildings that its own officers acknowledge to be local treasures. A viable alternative exists. The school building is a solid structure which has stood for 125 years and could be easily repaired, given the willingness and interest to do so. The applicant's planning statement claims that though conversion is possible, it would be problematic. We question why little to no evidence is given to justify this position, or why substantial demolition is necessary to develop the site. SAVE has been involved in many similar cases involving historic but unlisted buildings, and it is our policy where practical to come up with an alternative scheme showing that they can be preserved, adapted and reused on a viable basis. Our alternative scheme for Cowbridge School would allow for the historic building to be preserved and would provide 37 homes, 4 more than currently proposed. We are engaged in discussion with another affordable housing provider, Pobble, who have the interest and the means of delivering such a conversion scheme. However, a decision today to approve demolition would render this opportunity and the building lost forever. Finally, the climate cost. The demolition of a building of this size and age is unsustainable in climate terms. I encourage members to consider the applicant's claim that conversion is problematic in the context of the Council's climate emergency declaration and the climate objectives set out in the local development plan. To conclude, Cowbridge School is not just another brownfield site. This is a historic site which reflects a key part of Cowbridge's and Wales's history, with a solid building perfectly capable of being converted to deliver much needed housing if given the opportunity with a housing provider who has the experience of conversion. Supporting a viable approach to preserving and converting the school would send a strong and positive message that the Vale of Glamorgan cares about its heritage, housing delivery and its climate commitments. And I call on members today to grasp this opportunity by refusing this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Oakley. And it looks as though you were just in time. If you could just stay there a minute while I ask committee members whether you have any matters of clarification you would like to ask Mr. Oakley. I see no indication. In that case, thank you, Mr. Oakley, for your time. If you now mute yourself and go off camera, please. We move on to our next speaker, who is Dr. Tudur Davies. Again, if you could come on camera and turn on your mic, Dr. Davies.
Yes. Can you hear me?
I can just hear you, very quiet.
I'll just make sure my mic is in a Better place, is that better?
That's better. Yeah, right. Again, you have 3 minutes from the time you start speaking, and we will indicate, give you an indication maybe of a minute out, and then switch you off at 3 minutes. Thank you very much. Carry on.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the Planning Committee. I speak to you today on behalf of Save Cowbridge Girls' School campaign group, who since the beginning of this application when it was submitted in 2018 have supported redevelopment of the site. However, we do not support the loss of the school and poorly sought out scheme laid before you today. The officer's report highlights a number of planning policies that the application fails to satisfy. Areas such as drainage and noise have not been addressed satisfactorily. The report infers that demolition and replacement with a flatter development is the only viable option. It is not. Financial viability is not a material planning consideration. Conversion of the school buildings may not be viable for this developer, but Pobble Housing Association have declared a strong interest in converting the school buildings while also providing additional units in the grounds. We hereby ask you to reject the current scheme on the following material planning considerations. It fails to meet the criteria set out in LDP Policy SP10 and Planning Policy Wales 2018, Sections 617 and 618. It does not protect our historic environment. The importance of the school is well established, and the report acknowledges the application fails against this policy. No evidence is provided as to why conversion is not being considered. The application contravenes LDP policies MD6 and MG2. The report acknowledges that this is overdevelopment. The LDP calls for 20 units on the site. While development of the site is not objected to, overdevelopment is. This is particularly of concern as it negatively impacts on future residents. The lower levels of the flats lie 1.8 metres below ground level, which is likely to severely impact on the light levels in these units. The stone wall alongside the road makes them appear even further below ground. This does not provide open and pleasant living conditions for the potential residents. The units close to the flyover are subject to requirements for further noise assessments and mitigated post-build. The noise survey was conducted 4 years ago when the flyover speed limit was 50 rather than 70 miles an hour and before the increase in traffic due to Clare Garden Village. The impact that this has had on the noise levels in this area is evidenced by the noise survey commissioned by the council for the adjacent primary school. This needs to be revised as a matter of urgency and before any decision is made. The proposal contravenes SBG Amenity Standards Policy 2, amenity space within residential developments, Section 5.2 and 5.6.
1 minute left.
There are
30 seconds, sorry.
There are inconsistencies in the officer's report and the site plans in areas which are accessible to residents. The small area of residential space directly alongside the flyover falls well below the SPG. While provision is made to improve local parks, this does not help the potential residents who may be less mobile and unable to easily access these spaces. They are also public spaces, not private residential areas. Following the pandemic, even more emphasis should be placed on adhering to these amenity standards. In summary, the in-principle development of the site is acknowledged. However, the current scheme is deficient due to poor provision of open space, loss of an important historic asset, and overdevelopment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Davis. Right, again, are there any points of clarification from members of the committee? I see none. In that case, thank you, Dr. Davis. If you could now mute and go off screen. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next speaker I have on my list is Councillor Nicholas Wood. If you could.
Good afternoon.
Is your camera working?
Yep, I'm here. Can you see me?
No.
Yes,
now I can. Yeah.
Right.
You have again, Councillor Wood. You have 3 minutes, and time will start when you start speaking.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and committee members. I'm taking this opportunity to address the committee to express my and the public members of the ward's feelings on the proposed development. Please excuse any errors I make in addressing you today. This is my first address to committee. It is apparent to all here today this is a very emotive issue for the town of Cowbridge, and the girls' school is connected with Cowbridge in a very strong way. Cowbridge is a town of substantial history, and the girls' school does represent a significant part of the history of the town, with many current residents having attended there. It is, in my opinion, that whilst not designated so, it is of architectural and historical significance for the Vale of Glamorgan and the town of Cowbridge. On the personal level, I'm not opposed to redevelopment, having worked myself in the remediation industry where reusing, repurposing and redeveloping of sites is part of progress. However, I do believe that the apparent unwillingness to designate these buildings to be protected, the school represents an important part of the history of Cowbridge. Thus, I believe the current plan to completely demolish the existing buildings to repurpose the site falls short of what could be considered as a reasonable attempt to repurpose a site of such history. The proposal to demolish the existing building completely to add additional space appears to exceed proposed housing density for the site, thus representing an overdevelopment. This is also likely to have a detrimental effect on road access, particularly as the new primary school will be added just adjacent. Beyond this also creates a situation where the ground floor accommodation will be set 1.8 metres below road level, hardly a very nice environment. An increase in density can apparently be permitted when the development is in keeping with the surrounding area. Whilst I'm no expert on architectural design, the proposal seems not only out of character with the surrounding area, but much of Cowbridge, and also in a very prominent roadside view. As I said, I'm not against redevelopment, but I would wish that the committee consider if this proposal goes far enough to protect what is a building of historic value to the Vale of Glamorgan, whilst providing an outcome that is as close to our deal as possible for those who will be using the development in the future, whilst satisfying the desires of the local community. Of course, this is a tremendously difficult balance to achieve, but I'm told there are other options available.
1 minute.
To retain more of the original buildings, whilst achieving a better living environment for those who will live there. When choosing to demolish buildings that are of such value to the community, every effort should be made to achieve an outcome as close to balancing all three of these issues.
Thank you, Councillor Wood. Again, if you could stay there a moment, I see if anyone has any matters that they want to ask about. Consequential matters? No. Thank you. In that case, Councillor Woods, thank you for your comments. And if you can now go off screen and mute yourself.
Thank you very much.
Right, the next speaker against is the Councillor, the Reverend Heather Weddle. Are you with us, Councillor Weddle? Reverend Weddle?
Yes, I believe I am.
There you go. Right. In that case, same rules. 3 minutes. I'll give you the nod when you're into about 3 minutes. Into about 2 minutes, and timing will start when you start speaking.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to you all. The Town Council's understanding, in summary, is as follows. In December 2018, following the required pre-application consultation, a planning application was submitted by Havard to demolish the former Cowbridge High School for Girls on a Berthin Road and replace it with social housing. Havard described themselves as a socially conscious, not-for-profit organisation, providing housing, care and support services across South Wales. Since that time, the campaign group has done a lot of work to research and highlight the historical and architectural importance of the building and have sought to have it listed. Cadw rejected the listing application, but the campaign group is appealing against that decision via the Petitions Committee of the Welsh Government and has succeeded, or did succeed, in securing a debate in the Senedd during February. In that debate, it was noted that planning application would be considered by the Vale of Glamorgan Council Planning Committee on the 2nd of March, and people were invited to write to the Vale of Glamorgan Council. The owner of the building is the Sir Thomas Mansell Franklin Trust. Their position is that the Havard proposal is the only viable option, and if it doesn't go ahead, they'll be left with a decaying building. There is a viable alternative scheme that will provide good quality social housing whilst retaining the existing building, and that there is a buyer for the site. However, they say that the buyer's efforts to work with both Havard and the Trust have been rejected. The Town Council believes that if there is a viable scheme on the table which will retain the existing building, then that must be fully explored before any decision is taken on the Havard proposal, which represents a significant overdevelopment of the site with a number of serious issues. It would be terrible if a building with local and national historical and architectural importance were to be demolished, when realistic options appear to exist to retain and restore it. The Town Council is willing to take part in any discussions which can help to resolve matters. It has been brought to our attention that the developer submitted the planning application a very short time before the sustainable drainage regulations came into being. We understand a revised scheme which reused the existing buildings, would be what the majority of the community would find much more acceptable. We would like to see this current application rejected and alternative plans considered. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Weddle. Again, if you'd like to stay on while I see if anybody's got any points of clarification. Again, I see none. Thank you. If you now mute and go off camera. And finally, on this is the final speaker on this issue is Mr. Stephen Harries, who is speaking for the application, for the applicant or the representative. You have 6 minutes wherever you are. Mr. Harries, can you come on screen?
I'd just confirm as well, Chair, Mr. Harris has got the 6 minutes because obviously we had 2 objectors with 3 minutes each in terms of fairness.
Yeah,
but 2 public speakers,
all right.
Objectors.
Okay, I understand. And the 2 councillors get their own. Yeah. So, Mr. Harries, are you able to come on screen? Yes,
yeah,
there you are.
Yeah,
there you go. Same rules apply, except you get the 6 minutes, and your time will start when you start speaking.
Thank you, Chair. Pranandar, good afternoon, councillors. My name is Stefan Harris of LRM Planning. I'm acting on behalf of Havod Housing Association, the applicant. Thank you for the opportunity to address you today. I will cover the planning arguments for this application, and I also want to focus on the beneficiaries of this development should it be approved. This development is for 100% affordable housing. I'm sure you will agree that delivering housing for those in the greatest need is an incredibly important issue. The main focus of the objections appear to be the retention of the existing building. This school has a local value, using an attractive but commonly found architecture that is typical of this period, so it is in no way remarkable. It has also been empty for some 10 years and is in a state of dereliction. Cadw considered that whilst it may be the first intermediate girls' school in Wales, that alone is not a compelling argument in favour of its listing. Cadw identified there are other listed examples of greater value that reflect the outcomes of the Welsh Intermediate Education Act of 1889. Therefore, it's clear that Cadw has carefully considered both the historic and architectural merits for listing this building and concluded that it did not warrant protection on either count. We've heard today about potential other viable uses of this building that could be proposed within the confines of the existing building shell. I've no doubt that this is theoretically feasible, but that is not the application before you today. As Welsh Government quite rightly has exacting standards on affordable housing, conversion of the existing building would result in far fewer lower quality homes, which would likely be smaller in size. I find it very difficult to believe that there would be 37 dwellings that could fit into a building of this size and form. There are so many issues with refurbishing and converting the school, such as structural issues, challenging floor to ceiling heights, general decay of the building, limited headspace in upper floors, its irregular footprint, access for wheelchair users, and general access and space standards. Members are not here to consider the merits of a potential alternative proposal. This application is a viable proposition to provide 34 new EPCA-rated homes for people in need. There is no lawful planning reason to retain the existing building. I'd like to briefly mention the applicant and their ethos. Havod is a not-for-profit organisation committed to supporting communities by providing high-quality, affordable homes based on identified local need. The provision of affordable housing is a material planning consideration, and it's a key LDP strategic objective. There is a significant demand for affordable housing in Cowbridge. In fact, the waiting list shown on page 61 of your reports shows 375 households need to be homed in Cowbridge alone. This includes demand for 206 one-bedroom, 109 two-bedroom, 49 three-bedroom and 9 four-bedroom homes. At the drop of a hat, this development could address a little under 10% of that need, but that would still leave a huge waiting list. In terms of county-wide need, the recently published draft local housing market assessment for the Vale shows an annual net need for 917 homes for social rent over the next 5 years. With a notable lack of affordable housing in the Vale, and particularly Cowbridge, this redevelopment is arguably essential. In 2021, a total of 6,940 applicants registered for social housing on the Homes for You register, with local demand growing much quicker than supply. The figures I just mentioned for Cowbridge take into account the development at Darren Farm, which is an outlier in that it was able to provide 190 affordable homes, but still leaves huge demand. Cowbridge is a desirable town, and the frequency with which small infill sites come up is few and far between. So we must ensure that when a deliverable affordable housing proposal is on the table, all stakeholders to the process are given just cause to support these applications and ensure delivery of homes for people in need. The Vale Council are also in support of a local lettings policy for this scheme, ensuring that local people will receive priority for these properties. This development will provide employment and training opportunities within the area. Havard are keen to invest in the local community with construction activity directly boosting the foundational economy and providing employment opportunities. Havard intend holding sessions with pupils at Cowbridge Comp to encourage pupils into the construction industry, particularly underrepresented groups such as women, disabled and the BAME community. Havard has also willingly agreed to pay over £120,000 in Section 106 contributions that will directly benefit the local community. Havard's funding partly comes from the public purse. Profit is not a consideration. This is all about housing people in need. We are in the midst of a cost of living crisis. On top of the pre-existing housing crisis, we need to provide homes for those most in need. To give you a quick idea of the process that gets this committee today, Havard have had to agree to the provision of a bespoke bat house on site and endured protracted negotiations with Natural Resources Wales. Havard have had to dig archaeological trenches. The application has been subject to Senate debates, despite Cadw categorically saying the buildings...
1 minute, Mr. Harris.
Havard have reduced the scale by 14 flats from the original submission. There have been tree preservation orders applied to the site post the planning application submission. This application is accompanied by a host of detailed technical reports and drawings. None of these topics has resulted in objections from consultees to the process. As your officer has so ably and diligently concluded in assessing this application, there are no technical constraints to this development. This is an opportunity to provide high quality, sustainable housing in a suitable location to address a known local housing need and house local people. I really hope that members follow their officer's recommendation today and grant approval for this development. Thank you for your time. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Again, if you stay on screen for a moment while I see if there are any points of clarification from any of the members of the committee. Again, I see no indication that there might be. Councillor Payne.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Harries, I just wondered if you looked at any sustainable alternatives in terms of some of the objections that were raised, looking at kind of like a blended building or using the fascia.
Councillor Payne, that isn't a point of clarification in terms of what Mr. Harris was saying. There are quite strict rules on that. Okay. This isn't one. I'm sure, though, that that will be addressed during the debate by the officers. Councillor Ian Perry, do you have a point of clarification?
Yeah, you mentioned something about involving the school, sort of education-wise, in the demolition and construction. That was right, yeah, and there are obviously safety implications. Could you just explain that a little bit more?
Sorry, I struggled to find my mute button then. Yeah, that's come directly from the applicants, Havard. It's not directly involved in construction per se. It's more about using the sort of proximity of the development site to the school in order to perhaps go into the school and conduct classes with interested participants, perhaps in a sort of work experience sort of context, just to show what the development industry and construction, what opportunities it may provide. But in terms of any actual working on site, that would be subject to completely separate decisions by the contractors in terms of internships and trainees and things like that.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Mr. Harris. Right, there being no further points of clarification, if you now mute and go off screen, Mr. Harris, and we go back to Mr. Stephen Butler, please to respond to the speakers.
I'm happy to take wider questions because I think there'll be a number of issues that are going to be very, very common. So I'm happy to maybe take other members questioning first, and then perhaps I can come back with a series of answers.
Okay, if you want to do it that way around. In that case, can I see if there are any members of the committee who would like to comment on this application or ask questions of our officers? Councillor Champion.
Yes. When the objectors are saying that there are certain planning matters that are not being met by the scheme. As the officer looked at these planning matters, historical buildings, I think was one, wasn't it?
If you look at the matters arising that you've been given, most of those things have been addressed in that, but I'll certainly let Mr. Stephen Butler respond to that as well. Any other? We'll take a few. So if there are any other contributions that people would like to make. Helen.
Again, Chair, on the same point, I wanted to know if any sustainable alternatives were looked at in terms of retaining the history and integrity and of the built environment.
Okay, I'm happy just to come back. I think there's a few points there. So I think, as the chairman has said at the outset of the committee, and as Mr. Stefan Harris has said, we are here to look at the application presented in front of us. Now, don't get me wrong, in many instances, we have schemes and we do suggest, for example, that they can do this or do that and amend the scheme. But that's where there would be in principle, problem with the scheme. In this case, we've gone through an extensive sort of back and forth, and particularly with obviously Cadw's view on the scheme, that right from the start, from the pre-app stage, even from the allocation in the LDP and the quotes within the LDP, whilst it said that the building could be favoured, and no one here is going to dispute that it does have some local architectural and historic interest, and indeed the report concludes with that. Quite simply, it does say it's contrary to the proposal in itself is contrary to policy SB10 because it would result in a loss of building with historic interest. So, but as Councillor Wood has said, it's all about the balance. So in this case, we're presented with a scheme to demolish a building which is not statutory protected. It has local significance, but as do many buildings have local significance. And we have to then balance what is going in its place, the appropriateness of that building. In this case, we welcome the fact that an affordable provider is looking to develop this site, and it's a site where an allocated site where ordinarily a market housing provider would pick it up and likely build at a much lower density. So we're getting, RSLs really do have to compete against market housings for picking up sites, and it's quite rare that they sort of pick up allocated sites, I'll be honest with you. So we've got that to consider. I know some reference was made to the fact that the density is very high and it's not in accordance with our density policies. It is in accordance with it, and obviously the report does go through that. I mean, we have target densities for minor rural settlements, etc. And obviously the allocation was based on a notional 20 units being proposed, which I assumed was based on them being dwellings. Nevertheless, as a flatted block, you're always going to have much, much higher density. But what you've got to look at is the footprint of the, if I just show my plan, you've got to look at really how much of the plot is being developed, because I totally agree. We don't support overdevelopment at all. But again, you wouldn't necessarily perhaps pick up that these were flats. These could be, a linked row of townhouses, plus obviously you've got the houses here. So in terms of density, whilst it is much, much higher, it's never, you can't refuse something on density if the resulting density has a building which is not considered of a out of keeping, overscaled form and siting, etc., and one which is also providing parking and also providing, albeit not to our standards, amenity space. So, I'm afraid there are many, we do have lots of affordable housing schemes, particularly in sort of Penarth and Barry, where because we're in sustainable locations, they don't have any parking, and that is generally accepted. In this case, we are getting a parking provision of 1-to-1 and 2 for each of the flats. And in terms of the amenity space, there are some instances where we get very, very little. This has actually got quite a reasonable amount of amenity space. And as a point of clarification that we made yesterday in the matters arising note, the plan does indicate a 2-metre high fence, which some concern was raised how this amenity space and this more informal area beyond would be accessed, but there is no fence that will be around here, and all this you've got the seating area, but the rest of this area, albeit it's meant to be a sort of dark corridor and quite naturalistic, is going to form extended amenity space. So I'll be honest with you, the schemes that we've dealt with historically, this scheme really does stack up. We've got to be flexible. You hardly have any sites where the scheme ticks every single box. It's all about creating the planning balance. And in this case, you know, we're certainly not underestimating the strength of public opposition against the demolition of the building. And, you know, that is absolutely clear, and we're not disregarding that at all. But, you know, we've gone through a number of, as the report shows, we've gone through a number of design iterations, as Stefan Harris has said, bringing the scale of the building down, bringing the number of units down, so to a point where the buildings themselves really do appear, when you look at the wider street scene, pretty much as a row of linked townhouses, which I think, perhaps as the report does suggest, is likely the sort of scale that we would be getting if a market provider built this scheme out. You know, I think they, in fairness to the architects, they've done a good job in addressing our concerns. And we did have significant concerns originally. The original scheme, the ridge was above the parapet of the flyover, which obviously was totally unacceptable. You know, this has come down really to a scale that we feel is appropriate. Again, I've got to emphasise, this is not a conservation area. I know much has been said about the impact on the historic environment, but it is a building of some historic and architectural interest. It is not a historic environment in itself. It's outside the conservation area. The residential estate which adjoins it comprises of 1950s, 60s semi-detached houses, and opposite we've got 1970s houses. Again, I think some mention was made about the drainage being deficient. The drainage certainly isn't deficient, as correctly said by I can't remember who raised it, but the scheme was submitted prior to SAB. Nevertheless, we can't help that, and as a result of that, the scheme will be dealt with under planning and under the relevant planning conditions, as opposed to being dealt with by the separate SAB body. In essence, if it were to go down the SAB route, it would possibly likely mean that more open space and above surface drainage features would have to be provided, which would mean, as a result, you would probably have less of the area that could be developed, less parking. So you could even perhaps get the same number of units, but you wouldn't have any provision for parking, which actually, being in a sustainable location, we may not necessarily have a problem with as officers. So I'm happy to leave it there, and certainly happy to take any more questions.
There are some more questions. I'll actually come to Councillor Perks, Sandra, as you've not yet spoken.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask the officer a question. I wondered how Havard's plan of 34 properties that will be obviously built to Welsh Government standards for housing that required for social housing would be too many overdevelopment in comparison to Pobble's 37. I wondered, obviously we haven't had sight of anything that Pobble want to do, but I wondered whether you could.
It's a very difficult one to comment on. I mean, I've had a cursory glance at the alternative scheme, but it's not my job to look at that and then show the agent or the applicant this scheme and say, why can't you build that? You know, as being clearly set out, we have to consider what's in front of us. I must admit, it on the face of it, it does seem very surprising that they could provide a greater number of units, but I do have to question that Pobble, we have to deal with the council's RSLs that work within the council area, which know the standards. Now, I'm not aware of that RSL, and certainly they're not banded to work within the Vale. So Havard understand what the requirements are in terms of Welsh Government standards, and have clearly built those houses to those, clearly built the flats and the houses to those standards. We could find, if we were to go down that route with an alternative application, that that the layouts weren't satisfactory and would have to be changed, and the numbers brought down in any case. So, it can't really comment on the alternative scheme. Again, just on the sort of the standards, as Stefan Harris, the agent, has said, these will have an EPC rating of A, which is the highest you can achieve. Now, normal private rental houses would have an EPC rating of E. So that does have to be factored in terms of thinking of sort of more holistically about, you know, the efficiency of knocking a building down and putting new buildings up, plus the fact that these buildings themselves will be flatted blocks, so the number of external walls will be limited. Whereas if you had a private house builder and building semi-detached houses, you know, the EPC rating and effectively the energy production would be far less, and it would be for a lesser number of units. So really, from what we're delivering on this site, this is probably as good as you can get from a flatted block, because you've got the density there, and you've got the EPC rating for each of the units. So in terms of accepting the, you know, the demolition, in terms of new build efficiency, this is probably as good as you're going to get for a flatted block, and it's one that's being delivered by an RSL for 100% affordable housing.
Moving on, Councillor Payne, you want to come back and ask another question or comment?
No, thank you. I think that's a legacy hand there.
Legacy hand, right. As I said earlier, please check for your legacy hands and take them down. In that case, Councillor Champion, I believe I did see yours come up again.
Yes, please. You say that you took account of the local opposition of sort of 3,000. And what did the local conservation officers say? The CADU, didn't they actually say that it was of historical interest locally?
Absolutely, it did, and the report does state that. So, you know, we're not.
Doesn't that have any bearing?
It does, yes, it does have a bearing, and the report then concludes that in terms of the demolition of the building, that it would be contrary to policy SP10. So we've accepted that the building
conservation and the conservation officer said what?
The conservation officer's comments are set out within the report. The conservation officer has stated that the building would meet the criteria for local listing. That is that the building, unlike CADU, who look at whether it's of national significance, the conservation officer would look at whether it's of the same kind of test, if you like, but within the Vale of Glamorgan. So it's of local significance, and he's quite categorically said that it is of local significance. Now, we're not ignoring those comments. Those comments are referenced and clearly set out in the report. And as I've said,
but you're recommending for approval.
I know, but as I've said, it's the demolition of the building is one aspect of the proposal.
Yes.
I think it's worth.
We have to look at the entire proposal, and as I said, and it's clear in the report that we do state that it is contrary to policy SP10. But whilst we take into account the depth and strength of not just local, almost national opposition against it, we have to make a decision in accordance with the development plan. We are duty bound to do that.
Can I just bring Marcus in? I think he wants to comment on this as well.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Steve. Yes, it's just really to add to the comments that Steve has said, but also to point out, and this is the most important issue really, that the planning is a balance. And so while a scheme may be contrary to one policy, it'll be obviously in accordance with another policy within the plan. And you'll never find a scheme, or very rarely find a scheme, that doesn't in some way fall contrary to one or another policy within the local development plan. So what officers have to do when they're making recommendations is to balance those policies and take account of the situation that's in front of them. In this case, while if the building had been listed or had been in a conservation area, I think the situation would probably have been different. Well, almost certainly been different if it was listed. While it meets the terms for, as Steve has referred to, locally listing, or as we call it, county treasure, and nominating it as a county treasure, that nomination itself would not prevent the building from being demolished. Indeed, or the owner of the building deciding they wanted to demolish it, and there's very little the council could actually do other than serving another set of legislation called an Article 4 direction on the building to stop it being demolished. That would not be done where CADU have already looked at it and said they're not going to formally list the building, or be very unlikely to be done on that basis, particularly when the building doesn't sit within a conservation area and is in a location where it is, as Steve has already indicated, surrounded by structures which are much more modern and housing which is much more modern. So what's happened in terms of the assessment is that the issues that are before the council, which is the design of the new building, and the what it's providing in terms of affordable housing has been weighed against those negative aspects, which are, if you like, policy SP10 of the local development plan, which refers to, in one part, locally listed buildings, but then goes on to talk about listed buildings and buildings in conservation areas, and weighs that against the other policies in the plan, and has come to the conclusion that the need for affordable housing, following the long protracted negotiations that have been undertaken with the developer around reducing the scale and size of the building so it has less impact on neighbouring properties as well and less impact on the town scale, that is why it has been recommended for approval. So just wanted to clarify that point.
Thank you, Marcus. Moving on then, Councillor Hodges. Nick, you get a hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Interesting debate so far. It's to allow this scheme to happen, obviously the school buildings have to be demolished, and I think that's the major point of disagreement for a number of people. It's what concerns them. One point I feel I have to make is that it's been said that the building isn't listed and it's not in the conservation area. Well, if you look at Barry, and I do a lot, we have a number of buildings that have been adapted for housing and some of them for affordable housing. We have the Seaview Labour Club, we have the Windsor, we have the Castle Pub, and we've got two former Victorian churches and school buildings as well. All of those had been adapted and reused. Now, planning is a balance. I fully accept that. I sometimes think we get the balance wrong, and sometimes I try and argue to adjust that balance. If we are saying that we are a green council, surely we should be looking at reuse more often and more sympathetically. I do have a lot of respect for old buildings. I do have a lot of hope that heritage is considered. I feel we're slightly gone off the centre ground of where we should be. I have a belief that perhaps we need, as a council, to consider the reuse of this building. I've got to be convinced a bit more, I think. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Moving on, Caris Stallard, Councillor Stallard.
Hi, yes, it's just a clarification actually about the number of parking spaces, because I thought what Stephen just said wasn't what I'd read this afternoon, but I might just be confused. Was it 1 car per flat and then 2 cars for each of the houses?
Yes, I believe that's the case, yes.
Is it necessary to have 2 parking spaces for each of the houses, considering how close the site is to town and to schools?
I would, normally agree. Just in terms, for members, in terms of parking standards, we are dealing with maximum standards now. So the drive sort of nationally is to obviously, look at alternative modes of transport and not to favour the car. So obviously by putting parking spaces in, people will probably use them and decide to buy a car if their space is there. So absolutely, this, as I previously said in relation to the drainage, we could live with less spaces. Nevertheless, number of the representations received have complained about some of the parking spaces being displaced on a Holton Road and where people are going to park. So it's all about the balance. We are actually happy with 2 spaces per unit. A Holton Road is a relatively busy road, and we wouldn't necessarily want any overspill on that road. So, the highway engineer is happy with 2 spaces. We're happy with 2. We don't think that the spaces are at a cost of over provision to the site. And if it was, planners are the first to try and knock spaces down, for example, to get extra amenity space or ecological areas. We think that the balance is right here and is relatively realistic. Yeah.
So you're worried that people, if there's only one for each of the houses, people will park on the main road. That's your concern.
I mean, it's not something that's been specifically stated by the highway engineer. He's looked at the provision and is happy with the provision. I mean, it's never been, we never had the application in for one space for each of the houses. So that's never been tested as to whether or not that would actually cause harm. But from a planning point of view, we're generally happy with that. I totally agree with the point, and particularly in areas of Barry and Penarth, we really do reduce the standards down, particularly for flatted development, often to effectively half a space per unit. Here, we're looking at one space per unit. Again, we are getting representations about parking as well and the impact of parking. So the fact that actually providing off-site parking, we all wish that everybody walks to the town centre, and hopefully they will. And certainly they've got a realistic opportunity of doing that without having to use that car. Additionally, just on the parking issues as well, obviously we've got secured 10% provision for electric charging points. They're not actual points themselves, so they're kind of passive points rather than active points. But in terms of going forward,
actually on the site, or
it's basically the 10% of those spaces will have all the cabling installed, and there's a planning condition that requires that. So we're future proofing the development as well to enable very easily to convert those spaces for electric car use.
I just think it might be, you get more environmental brownie points if you reduce the number of parking spaces for the houses. Just a thought.
Thank you, Councillor Saad. I mean, we've got to look at the application in front of us. It's not up to us to modify it. Lastly, then, of the hands I see up at the moment, Councillor Perry. Ian, can you come on screen and talk?
Hi, good afternoon. I'll just turn my camera on so you can also see me. There you go. I've popped back. I might not have mentioned again, I do know the site rather well. I did actually attend Cowbridge School, hated it. So there's no sentiment there. Just looking at certain things, the Vale Glamorgan Council doesn't have the best reputation in terms of heritage when you look at Dufferin House and the damage that was done in the last couple of decades. And then you've got the Whittemore Roman Villa, which was bulldozed, which was a crying out shame. So we haven't exactly got the best reputation for heritage. Obviously, I'm a new councillor. I thought that the training I had on the Future Generations Act, or the Health and Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, was very low, probably what I expected, which is why it's not done so well at the Vale Glamorgan Council, in my opinion. But I do look at the Future Generations reports, and one of the wellbeing goals is a Wales of vibrant culture. And that includes, I'm reading here for a different screen, a society that promotes and protects culture, heritage, and the Welsh language, blah, blah, blah. So that sort of points to protecting the older historical buildings of local interest. Another of the wellbeing goals is a globally responsible Wales, a nation which, when doing anything to improve the economic, social, environmental, and cultural well-being of Wales, takes into account whether doing such a thing may make a positive contribution to the goal of well-being. And of course, you've got the arguments on sustainable development, and I've heard it's going to be EPCA, but how many decades will EPCA take to recoup the carbon lost, the embodied carbon in the existing building? So in terms of the environment, the existing building will always be more sustainable than a new building. Okay, so you can't actually build more sustainably than the building you've already got because of the energy built in and the finite amount of resources we have. So I mean, I'm very much a man about people, planet, and profit, and I'm very wary of profit. Yeah, I do know the site rather well, and I am concerned about the noise from the flyover. The noise there is a bit unique. It's not the general hum of traffic that you normally get and the whoosh of a passing vehicle. With the flyover, it's more of a clack, 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 clack. It's also like someone claps twice, a pause, claps twice, pause. And we're in an era of climate change, climate emergency. I know that I sleep with windows open more often than not, and on the top floor of that building, it's proposed that due to the noise level, windows will have to be kept shut at night. Other people have mentioned that the flats that are going to be 1.8 metres below the actual ground level.
Councillor Perry, you seem to have frozen. Perhaps we need to turn your camera off. No, we've lost him.
If you can still hear us, Councillor Perry, if you can possibly turn your camera off or try and restart, come in and come out of the meeting.
We'll pause for a moment to see if that can be resolved. Apparently not.
So yeah, I'm back. Sorry about that.
Right.
Morgan IT wants to do an update on my laptop and just throws me out.
Yeah, turn your camera off. That might help.
Yeah, it's nothing to do with that. It's the actual laptop. He's trying to do an update. So perhaps I can ask the IT department not to have updates set to go off at 5 p.m. in the afternoon, because we might be working on our laptops. Yeah. So obviously there's this noise issue, and I don't think it's appropriate to be asking or expecting people to shut their windows at night just so that they can actually sleep because of the noise issue. So that's something I picked up. But just returning to where I was at the beginning, and the Future Generations Act. The Future Generations Act is 2015 and supersedes the policies. And remember, the Future Generations Act is an act, it's law. It's not optional. Policies can be on balance. We hear lots of balancing. Unfortunately, the Future Generation Act is law, and we need to obey laws. Policies, we can mitigate, we can balance things out, but we must make sure that we actually comply with legislation, which is what the Future Generations Act is, and we need to make sure that we're not challenged as the council has been in the recent past. And I'll stop there, and hopefully my computer won't want to update. Thank you.
Stephen, is there anything you want to come back on any of that?
I'm happy to come back. Just there's a few points, just on the taking those points in turn, just on the noise issue. So, you know, clearly the site is next to a flyover with a level of traffic. So when the noise assessment was originally done, it related to a larger scheme, more units, and a much taller building. In fact, the building itself was higher than the parapet of the flyover. So the noise assessment hasn't. I accept the noise assessment hasn't been updated, but it can be argued that noise assessment looks at the worst case scenario where now the habitable rooms are further away. It's absolutely correct that, and a point picked up by our environmental health officer, that unlike traditional cavity walls, etc., roof spaces generally have lesser insulation. But obviously these are going to be habitable rooms. That's why there's a planning condition that seeks a post-installation testing for those sensitive rooms. In addition to that, yes, there is a requirement for, so the way the noise assessments looked at it is that pretty much the building meets the noise standards, the sort of accepted noise standards, without any real modification. So it's one of choice of the occupiers. So if the occupiers want to have the window open, they can. If it is noisy or they want to close the window, there is a requirement then to have a certain level of ventilation which meets the accepted standards as equivalent as if that window were to be open. Now, we would have the same issue pretty much. This is an allocated site, and we've had this issue on a number of sites. I can name sites in Dinas Powys, sites in St Nicholas, where we've had similar conditions. Unfortunately, many allocated sites are on principal roads, particularly along the A48, Darren Farm, etc., St Nicholas. And it's very typical that a certain number of units have to have noise mitigation. That's just that's just the way it is particularly on infill sites that form a logical sort of rounding off. In this case, it's an allocated site. So, we're happy that there's two conditions, subject to the noise mitigation as proposed, and also subject to the additional condition in relation to post occupation monitoring, that element would be addressed. Just on another point, and I think Mark has probably come in after I've sort of introduced it, but Mr. Perry's point about effectively knocking the building down and the energy produced in knocking it down and building a new building, from a planning point of view, we understand that, and that. And as a couple of other members have said, there have been schemes in Barry and Penarth which have very successfully utilised former public houses, etc., and converted them. Obviously, those schemes were submitted at the outset for conversions. They were happy with that the building itself worked in terms of providing the units proposed. In this case, I'm pretty sure that Havard would have looked at the kind of best case scenario in terms of cost benefit, etc., as to how they can develop this site. So they've clearly come to a view where it's just not practical, as Stefan Harris has said, not practical in terms of the complications internally, the building fabric, levels, etc., and that they don't have any choice in knocking the building down. But what we have to look at is there's nothing at the moment firstly in national planning policy, there's nothing, for example, in other associated regulations such as building regulations, or in any Welsh Government requirements, or the requirements for affordable houses under various housing acts that require the developer to demonstrate a balance or a very technical assessment in terms of how much CO2 is embodied in the demolition and the kind of life cycle of the replacement building. So that is not currently in place. So we don't have any grounds to go back and ask the developer to look to retain the building, because we think that environmentally it's going to have more impact. There is not a policy requirement for that.
Thank you, Stephen. Councillor Perry, is this a further point, or are you wanting?
Yeah, I'm just reading the reports from the Future Generations people, and I disagree that there's nothing there to support retaining buildings, because that's what's written there. So I would argue otherwise.
That's your privilege, but I believe Stephen Butler has answered.
Yeah, obviously,
has answered you.
The comment I've made there is in relation to being able to demonstrate that there's, in terms of the level of net CO2 harm, for example, over the lifespan of the building. That is very separate to the issue of the retention of a building, which, from our point of view, does have local historic interest. But, as we've, quite categorically said, we're not in a conservation area here. It's not a listed building, and again, it's all about the planning balance, and we've accepted that the proposal would be contrary to one policy in the plan. What we also can't forget is we're not just talking about local development plan, we're talking about the national development plan as well. We have two development plans to be in accordance with. One of those criteria in the national development plan is delivering affordable houses. So, we just can't look at one policy and one plan where we have two development plans to have to take into account.
Ian Robinson, you've got your hand up.
Yes, thanks, Chair. Sorry, at the risk of boring everyone with the third officer's voice, I just wanted to comment on the well-being and future generations issue. It is really like the planning balance. It's not a one-dimensional or a one-faceted thing. It doesn't simply say protect heritage, or it doesn't simply say protect the environment. It's about sustainable development. The Act actually talks about a resilient Wales, a prosperous Wales, a more equal Wales, and it says a society that enables people to fulfil their potential no matter what their background or circumstances. Now, refusing a planning application for affordable housing, which gives people that opportunity to live in a more equal Wales, you could argue that is contrary to the Act. So it is like the planning balance, because what it seeks to do is so multifaceted. So that's why we still, in the context of the Act, have to weigh all those things up. And it's not to say that there's no concern with losing a building like that, but it's just to say that actually we believe the weight to be afforded to the provision of so critically needed affordable housing, that outweighs it. And actually, in many respects, that complies with what the Future Generations Act is trying to do in delivering a more equal Wales. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Ian. Eddie Williams, Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. We have considered this in considerable depth now and recognise that we've gone through all the various areas. My view at the moment, and I've come to a point now where I've taken on board, particularly the local views, that it is considerable objections to this, and I can understand that. Like other councils, we've got that in our own local areas. We do want to retain a building. It does strike me, though, we've waited 10 years for this building to come to fore, and here we are now discussing a planning application, which what we should be decided upon is the actual application before us. There is a balance, and I understand the balance. So, and I am concerned if we do oppose this and we don't approve it, what reason we can give, because the officers have clearly put in there that CADU haven't accepted it, and if we, the key issue for us is we don't want it demolished, and personally I wouldn't want it demolished either, but experience in trying to improve old buildings and make them viable and livable, long term it doesn't work. There are usually issues that keep coming back to the people that are living in them. So I think we've had a reasonable discussion on it. And I think there isn't any further points that we can add to it. So I'm basically, so that we can make a decision on the application, I'm going to move officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Eddie. Rhiannon?
It's Councillor Mark Wilson here. Okay, I'd like to second Eddie Williams' proposal formally.
Thank you very much. Right, moving to, I guess we'll need a vote on this, so I will go through the list of members asking whether you are for or against officers' recommendations. I'll start with myself, and I am for. Councillor Birch.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Bruce.
Against.
Councillor Cave.
Against.
Councillor Champion.
Against.
Councillor Cowp.
Against.
Councillor Drake.
For.
Councillor Ernest.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Gilligan.
For.
Councillor Hodges.
Against.
Councillor Johnson.
An Erbyn, against.
Councillor Payne.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Perks.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Perry.
I'm against officers' recommendations.
Thank you. Councillor Stellard.
Obliged for.
Thank you. Councillor Williams. For. And Councillor Wilson.
For.
Thank you very much.
1, 2, 3,
7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3. So I make that 10-7. So that's carried. Thank you very much for everyone's contribution on that. Moving on, we go to 2021-00622 full 81 to 85 Holton Road, Barry. And I think this is Ian, yeah?
Thank you, Chair. That's correct. Yes. If members are happy, I'll share my screen so you can see the plans. Is that being shared?
Yep.
Great. Okay, so this is an application at 81 to 85 Holton Road in Barry. It'll be familiar to some members who've seen this application at Planning Committee previously, but not to others. So I'll run through the background. It's an application for an affordable housing development at 81 to 85 Holton Road, Barry. When the matter came before planning committee previously, it was there was a resolution to approve the application, subject to a legal agreement that delivered financial sums towards certain infrastructure. The council's policy on affordable housing developments of up to 25 units being delivered by either the council or the council's 4 partner social landlords is that we do not seek financial contributions on developments of up to 25. When the application came before committee previously, it was not being delivered by one of the 4 partner RSLs. Subsequently, the applicant has changed and it would now be delivered by Havod Housing Association. Now that means that, sorry, I'll stop sharing my screen. That means that we are proposing to amend the resolution. So rather than it being that there has to be a legal agreement that says the financial contributions are provided, we're proposing that the resolution is now that the legal agreement should state that the contributions should be provided unless the development is being delivered by one of the 4 partner RSLs, because that would be in line with the council's policy. So if Havod are delivering it, they would be exempt from the financial contributions given the size of the development. So it's the proposal is to amend the resolution to make that provision.
Thank you, Ian. Ian Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. So I want to speak on this both as the local member and as somebody who has previously called this into committee, which is why it was originally brought forward. The issue at stake here is obviously not that of the principle of the development. That's already been agreed by the December 2021 planning meeting. The principle here is really the ability or the option that's been provided or suggested that by changing the applicant, they can avoid their Section 106 responsibilities by referring back to the Cabinet 2016 decision to allow the 4 RSLs who work in the Vale to not make a Section 106 contribution for up to 25 affordable units. Obviously, in this case, the original application was brought forward by a different RSL, one doesn't ordinarily operate in the Vale, and they agreed through the agreement in December 21 for some substantial funding for educational facilities, for sustainable transport, noting of course there are no parking facilities at all on this site, for public art, and for contribution towards enhancing public open space in the vicinity of the site. There was no argument made at that time that viability was an issue. In fact, we've also heard from Havod Housing, who are the proposed new development here, RSL here. We heard in the previous application about how they were quite happy to make Section 106 payments for Cowbridge, and I am concerned that we are being allowed to be railroaded down a different route on the basis of a decision made by Cabinet in 2016. That's not the last Cabinet, that's the Cabinet before, and that was done on the basis of the anticipated implementation of the Community Infrastructure Levy, which would allow for no S106 or comparable SIL funds to be levied upon social housing providers, which included, I assume, us as a local authority providing housing at the time. We're now 5.5, 6 years on from that idea. I see this, with all due respect, the purpose of that was to avoid unnecessary expenditure by RSLs at the time. It's clear that there is no particular viability issue with the implementation of S106 funding for this. I therefore see this change in applicant as being a way of getting around the spending of that S106 money, and that means that more money will have to be found either from our budget for schools, but also for improvements to other things in the local area. There's a reason that we go hard on Section 106 money in the Vale of Glamorgan. It's something I've heard our chair talk about on many occasions when he was a backbencher. This is essentially a change of applicant to get around the rules and to allow somebody else to develop it and save some money. I don't think that's fair on my residents. My residents, you remember, those on the committee in December will remember for great frustration of residents, the fact that there is no additional parking. So they're going to be particularly put at pains here. And it doesn't sit right with me that there's been a change of applicant in RSL to get around the rules. I think that if the option is available, and I'm not sure why it's been brought to committee, if it's being brought to committee to be rubber stamped, or whether we are allowed to say, actually, we don't think this should apply on this occasion. I'd like some clarification on that, Chair, and from the planning officer. But also, I do think that if anybody from Cabinet is listening, and I'm aware that we've had a Cabinet member already move and Cabinet member second the previous application, so clearly Cabinet members are listening to what's going on. We should be also having a double look at this and whether this policy from 6 years ago is still relevant. So my main point here is that I would like to vote against the S106 finances being removed from this application. I'd like to clarify if that's possible, or whether we're simply being asked to rubber stamp something, in which case I don't really understand why it's been brought to committee for discussion. Thank you, Chair.
I think Marcus, do you want to comment on this?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so obviously there is a policy of the council, and okay, it went through Cabinet in 2016, but it remains a policy of the council not to charge affordable housing providers of the four groups we've referred to who operate in the Vale the relevant Section 106 contribution below a number of 25 houses. That was largely done to ensure that the social housing grant, which is given to those social housing providers, could be spread as far as possible, and to ensure that when that was used, and obviously it only affected property or developments less than 25 houses. When that social housing grant was used, none of it was used to contribute to Section 106 contributions. So that was the reason for bringing in the policy. As it stands, that is the policy of the council. It remains obviously this committee's within this committee's jurisdiction to vote on what is put before it now or not. The application that was approved originally was made by a different applicant and was made by an affordable housing provider who didn't meet the terms of that policy. And it is down to this committee to make that decision. So yeah, it is open to the committee to make a decision. They would be doing so in a way that was contrary to the council's standing, if you like, or the policy of the council that has been through Cabinet and has been in standing for 5 years now. But that doesn't say you can't do it.
Ian, is that a legacy hand, or do you want to come back in?
No, on the basis of what Marcus Goldridge just said, I'd like to move that we retain the Section 106 that's associated with this application, which I think at a rough count is around £180,000 worth of funding that's being removed from the centre of Barry as a result of this proposed change. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Hodges.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I'd like to second Councillor Johnson. I wonder if we'd had a different result last year if we didn't have the promise of all that Section 106 money, which is sorely needed in the centre of our town. It's there for mitigation. That mitigation apparently is now going to go. I can't countenance that.
Ian Robinson. Please.
Thanks, Chair. The only point I would like to make is that it's in our adopted SPG that this is the position with the four partner RSL. So if we make a decision that's contrary to that, we have to question how that would be looked at in terms of reasonableness and whether we are making a decision that's starkly in contrast to the SPG. It's not, so, as Marcus said, it's not so much about viability. It's about actually, even if Havod could afford to pay something, it's about the fact that actually then they can't put that money towards providing more affordable housing. And the decision was made because of the critical affordable housing need in the Vale. That's why delivering the affordable housing was prioritised above Section 106 for developments of that scale. The reason it's limited at 25 is because actually, they'll become a scale where, really there's likely to need to be infrastructure improvements anyway. But the fundamental reason was prioritising affordable housing because of the critical need in the Vale and in Barry in particular. So I just want to make members aware of the presence of that policy kind of in our SPG and in our planning policy as well.
Thank you, Ian. Any other comments on this matter? In that case, we have a motion before us to Councillor Perry. Councillor Perry.
Sorry, just watching to myself then. Yeah, I see where Ian's coming from. I'm just looking back here, and there's obviously no parking with this development, but it does mention bicycle spaces, 1 parking space for a bicycle for every 3 bedrooms. Is that right? And that's...
Sorry, is this for me?
Yeah,
I guess. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm top of my head. I don't know the exact numbers of bicycles. It hasn't changed since the last time the resolution was made.
So yeah, because I own 3, so
can I just stop a minute?
Yeah.
We're actually voting now on the amendment on Ian Johnson's amendment.
Right.
We're not talking about the substantive about the recommendations themselves. But once again, I guess I'll have to go around the membership and ask for your votes. I'm against whether you're for reinstating the 106 or against. Eddie, you've got your hand up. Sorry, is that on this?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I just need some clarity. So the motion is to against it. So if
the motion is either for reinstating the 106 S106 monies at the whatever level it was, 180, about 180 it was, 180.
No, sorry, Chair. I think we need clarity. The reason I'm saying is that the proposal seems straightforward to me. Is that it's we got an RSL dealing with it, there wouldn't be an S106. So technically, that's the case. The applicant now is going to be that. But if what I'm trying to get at now, what was the motion that Ian put forward, so that if it falls, can we then vote on agreeing with it? That's. We'll need a further vote. That's what I'm asking.
Yes, we will need a further vote.
Thank you. That's great.
Rhiannon, you've got your hand up on this. Oh, Mark.
It's Mark, actually. I just wondered if it's a viable amendment, because really, is the amendment really opposing the application? Because basically, the applicant here, there's no suggestion here that they will increase their 106 contribution. So really, it's really an amendment to oppose the application, isn't it, really?
Chair, can I come in quickly?
Hang on a sec, Ian.
No, I was going to see if Ian wants to, Ian Johnson wants to clarify. I think I'm in the same mind as Eddie, of just trying to get clear exactly what the motion is. Is it to approve but add the section 106 back in?
I think the struggle here is that the recommendation is either the residential units are delivered or the developer pays 54,000. Now, I think this is possibly not the best wording of what's on the paper, page 92 to 93, because I'm arguing for the developer pays, essentially, irrespective of who that developer is.
Could I just, Chair, do you mind if I just come in and I would suggest that you have a recommendation to insert essentially the either and the first part of that, which is the residential units are delivered by the Vale of Moor Council or by a partner housing association, and then it drops down to or and the general provisions of section 106. So the amendment that I think Councillor Johnson is suggesting is that the either part would be removed, and it would be reinstated, if you like, as the provision which is below or. So the amendment is to remove from the recommendation the part either and to the point or. Am I right, Councillor Johnson? Does that?
I think what's confusing here is that we've been given two motions in effect, because you're either you're arguing for one or the other, aren't you? I think that's what's here. I'm arguing for the developer pays, which is effectively the situation as was following the meeting in December 2021, and the alternative is the acceptance of the SPG as being suggested here as, you know, but what we've got here is both, which is confusing because normally you should have one motion which I should be amending, whereas actually we seem to have two motions here regardless. So I'm arguing that the section 106 requirement remains as per the agreement in 9th December 2021, which includes around £180,000 to the centre of Barry, and not that we change that because there's been a change of applicant. I hope that makes sense. I don't know quite how James Doherty wants to play that from his legal position.
I'm just trying to think whether, and this might be a question for Ian Robinson, is the only change from the approval that's already been given the addition of that first section, whereby that it be delivered by us or an RSL?
Yes, that's the only.
There's no substantive change to the actual planning application as such.
No, so I think that's it. I don't think Councillor Johnson is proposing we refuse the application. It's just that the resolution should be as per last time, that irrespective of who's developing it, the one applies.
So the motion we'd be voting on here is that it be approved subject to a section 106 provision with the things listed there.
I suppose that would be subject to an amended resolution in respect of how it appears in this committee report, which would amend it back in line with how it was, the resolution was last time it came to committee.
So I suppose the way to do it without, so I suppose the option would be, and I don't want to I'm trying not to lead people, but also I'm trying to not get into a position whereby you're the actual, it's a refusal of an approval subject to 106. That it would be possible for an amendment to be moved to the motion to approve, as Councillor Johnson is suggesting, to almost reinsert the wording that's recommended, I suppose.
Can I, sorry, just to cut in on what James has said. And so Councillor Johnson, the recommendation includes that either or. If the either or is removed, the recommendation is that the developer pays £54,000 for the provision of enhancement of education, the developer pays £57,000 towards sustainable transport, etc. So if your amendment would be that the section of text underneath the recommendation from either to or is removed, and that the application is essentially considered or is reinstated along the terms as set out beneath that. That's what you're saying. So your amendment would be that you remove the either to or the or and the section of text in between, which is what was giving either Harvard or the council the ability to complete the development without paying section 106. So you're amending the recommendation. Yeah.
I'm not sure if the issue here is that what you've got is a motion. So whatever the recommendation is, the councillors are able to put forward whatever motion they want to put forward. That's what that's what I mean. So it'd almost be easier if you had a motion to approve as per the recommendation with an amendment, then Councillor Johnson's amendment to remove the section at the start, which means you could then vote on the amendment to the motion to approve, and if that failed, you could then vote on the motion to approve as recommended. Does that make sense?
Chair, I think that makes sense to me. So what we're looking at is that this is the substantive motion, and my amendment would be to delete the from either to or. And then if that falls, then it goes back to the substantive motion regardless.
Yeah, I think
which then allows either for the development to be brought forward by the Vale of Morgan or an RSL partner, of the four partners, sorry, in the Vale, or if somebody else brings it forward eventually, then it would be done by somebody else. Is that right? I'm sorry,
I think
from Ian and others.
Yeah, I think that's right, Ian. I think, but the process to be would almost need to, for you to because you've kind of made a motion that's an amendment rather than a motion. If you withdraw yours, if there are then people who want to put forward a motion to approve as drafted, you could then put forward a motion to amend that is what you want. And then we vote on yours first. If that amendment fails, we then vote on the substantive motion as drafted.
So you want me and Nick to withdraw the motion.
Yeah.
Somebody else is going to move and second the motion, and then I will amend the motion.
Yeah, you're voting to amend the motion.
In that case, I withdraw my motion on the pretext and the substance that we will go and do it again in a moment.
I assume that's okay with Nick.
I'm happy to agree that. I just hope if we do lose the money in Barry that someone's going to make it up.
I have hands up as well. Rhiannon.
Thank you. Thank you. No, it's Rhiannon. Thank you. I have to say, I've been on planning for 20 years, and this is a complete dog's breakfast. I mean, I know that you have all tried to explain this as thoroughly as possible, but it is still confusing me. And I'm not really happy with the way that we're proceeding with this. I don't think any member of the public would understand what on earth we're doing. And we're here to be as clear and transparent as possible. I mean, I would like to see this withdrawn and the report rewritten so that it's much clearer and ordinary members of the public who don't know about planning law will be able to understand it. I'm really not happy with it at all. I mean, it's nothing to do with you, Ian, or whatever. It's just too complex for an ordinary person to understand.
Chair, if I just to come in there, I think what's made the issue complex is, and I'm sure he's not meant to do it. It's just that because Councillor Johnson has wanted to amend the recommendation rather than the actual decision. That's the complexity. So I'm afraid I don't think there's any way this report could be written to change it, because what we're dealing with is a change to the Section 106 contribution. The application was approved relatively recently. What we're talking about is a change to that recommendation. So I understand how it does look very complex. I think, unfortunately, probably what we could have done is explain that if there were concerns about the recommendation on the basis of Councillor Johnson's concern, it would have been better to make an amendment afterwards. But I think we've dealt with that now, and I completely understand how it looks complex. But I think what we're getting to is the point where, and I know what your concern was, James, is that we don't have a refusal of the application by accident, which is what I think Councillor Johnson doesn't want to do either. So we're at the position now where we are voting, someone would be recommending this application, and then Councillor Johnson would be again reinserting his amendment to that, and then you'd vote on the amendment, and then you would then vote on the substantive if that vote on the amendment didn't go through.
Yeah, or if it did.
Or if it did.
Thanks, Chair. If I can just clarify that we're talking procedural now, aren't we? My understanding is, and all the time we've been doing this, is that we have an amendment first and we vote on that. You don't have two motions on the table. So the motion that Councillor Johnson put forward was that he doesn't want an RSL not to pay. So that's really what the amendment is. So that would be technically the way to take this. But then,
sorry, Eddie. Yeah, but what you need before you move an amendment, you need a substantive motion to amend. I think is what we're getting at.
Okay, so
we need someone to move officers' recommendations. I think is what it comes down to.
Well, if that's the case,
I'll move officers' recommendations. Councillor Perks, sorry.
And I'll second it. Thank you.
Right. Ian, you've got a comment as well before we move to that.
Sorry.
Hang on a minute. Ian Robinson first. Ian Robinson first.
There was two hands up at the same time. Sorry, I risk of dragging this on. I just want to say one more thing, just so members are clear on what I see as being the context. If it were carried that this were amended and the resolution remained as was, i.e., whoever was delivering it, they had to pay. That doesn't mean that planning permission is granted and that happens because it's subject to a 106. So my understanding, James Doherty, please correct me if I'm wrong, is that the applicant could still then appeal non-determination on that basis. We're not imposing a planning permission on them, and they don't have their planning permission until they sign their legal agreement. So if they're not happy to sign up to the legal agreement, the application remains undetermined. They would still have a right of appeal against non-determination. That will be my understanding. I just want to make members aware of what the context would be, what the implication would be if it went that way.
Yeah, they would do, and I think the appeal would be on the basis that they non-determination, and then where we would say, well, we'd approved it subject to the 106, they would then be saying that they shouldn't have to enter into the 106 because of what the SPG says about what partner RSLs need to provide.
I suppose what I'm getting at is that the applicant would still have a right of appeal against this if that is the way that the decision went.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for that, Ian and James. Ian Johnson.
Can I move my amendment now, please, Chair?
Yeah. So will you please restate your amendment just for the record and so we're clear on what we're voting on?
Yes, I understand it, and my computer's just gone to sleep. It was to remove the section under recommendation from either to or. So.
Okay.
Second.
Right. I propose to move straight to the vote then, and I'll do the same thing as we did before and go through everybody's names one by one. We are voting we're voting on the amendment. If you are for the amendment, in other words, to make those changes that Ian Johnson has proposed, then say for. If you want to retain the original wording, say against. In this case, I think I'll lead off again, and I will say, despite the fact that I'm a poacher turned gamekeeper, I will say against, because I can see the problems down the line. Councillor Birch.
Against.
Councillor Bruce.
For.
Councillor Cave.
For.
Councillor Champion.
For.
Councillor Cowp. Councillor Cowp. Are you still there, Councillor?
Apologies. For.
Councillor Drake.
Against.
Councillor Ernest.
For.
Councillor Gilligan.
For.
Councillor Hodges.
For.
Councillor Johnson.
Obliged. For.
Councillor Payne.
Against.
Councillor Perks.
Against.
Councillor Perry.
I'm for the amendment.
Councillor Stellard.
Yn erbyn, against.
Councillor Williams. Eddie, you're muted.
Yeah, apologies there. Against.
And Councillor Wilson.
Against.
I make that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9, 8 for the amendment. So the amendment is carried. We now go on to.
It's not. I thought it was against.
No.
Sure.
No, it's
1,
carried.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 against, and 9 for. I've got.
Okay. All right. Apologies, Chair.
Yeah, that's right. You're right.
Yeah, so the amendment is carried. All right, thank you. In that case, we need to go again. This now becomes the substantive motion, and we need to vote on whether we agree the substantive motion. I mean, we have to, basically we have to. So again, we're voting for the motion as amended or against the motion as amended, and I'm going to vote for this time. Councillor Birch.
For.
Councillor Bruce. Councillor Bruce.
No idea.
Councillor Cave.
Sorry, Chair, could you just clarify again? I think this is getting a bit technically complicated here.
The
just
amendment was carried. It now becomes the substantive motion. We therefore now have to vote on the amended motion, and you're either for or against the motion as amended.
Yeah. Yes, I'm for as amended.
Right. Councillor Champion.
For.
Councillor Cowp, sorry.
For.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Drake.
For.
Councillor Ernest.
For.
Councillor Gilligan.
For.
Councillor Hodges.
For.
Councillor Johnson.
Applied. For.
Councillor Payne.
For.
Councillor Perks.
For.
Councillor Perry.
Oh dear. Yeah. Not particularly happy with this one. Or bicycle parking space for 5 bedrooms.
You're either for or against. That's all we need.
4.
Councillor Stallard.
Applied. For.
Councillor Williams.
Against.
And Councillor Wilson.
For.
Right. In that case, with only one against, that's now carried. Moving on, we come to the goods sheds.
All right, just to let you know, Councillor Thomas, Chair, we are both leaving the meeting. Okay,
yeah.
So Councillor Wilson, Councillor Birch, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'll see you shortly. Well, I might not see you shortly, depending how long this goes on.
So,
thank you.
Councillor Thomas, sorry, I have to leave now as well.
Who's that?
Councillor Cowp, I did say at the start.
Okay,
of the meeting.
yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right. Next one is land to the south and west of the goods sheds, Hood Road. That's 2021-01123 full. Ian, I think you're leading on this.
Indeed. Thanks, Chair. Share my screen. Right, so this is a planning application at the goods sheds in Barry. This is another application that's been to committee previously. It was deferred last time. When the application was presented to committee last time, it proposed tourist accommodation pods here on the railway line, office containers here, and the relocation of the outdoor gym to this point here next to the building known as Junction House. The relocation of the gym has now been omitted from the proposal, so the proposal is now only for the tourist accommodation carriages on the line and the office containers. Last time when it came to committee, there was a small amount of the consultation period outstanding. That's now been concluded. There haven't been any further representations received, and as I mentioned before, the application now omits the outdoor gym. These are particularly for the benefit of new members who weren't here last time, these are the proposed railway carriages, very similar to sort of rolling stock that'll be located on the railway line, and the office accommodation would be in the sort of fairly simple containers with sort of part steel, I suppose, and part glazing. I'll leave it there for now, Chair, and then I can respond to any queries if they arise.
Just to clarify, we're only being asked about about reapproving this with the changes.
No, sorry. So no decision was taken last time at all. It was deferred.
It was deferred, right? Yeah, I apologise. Yes, I remember now.
In order for us to allow for the consultation period to be completed, it's incidental or additional to that the gym has been relocated. We contacted the applicant and queried whether that needed to remain part of the proposal. I think they initially proposed to remove it because there was a residential block originally proposed on the western part of the site, but that was omitted. So they decided there was no purpose to relocating the gym. But yes, no decision has been made so far.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hodges.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm grateful, just to bring everyone up to speed. I was the one who, as the local member, who asked just before the elections that this be deferred, not only for the consultation period to work itself out, but also it gave, I think, an opportunity for things to perhaps change, and they certainly have. I said at the time that I was in favour of the conversion of the railway trucks carriages to tourism. I think it's innovative. I think it's quite fun. It's quite interesting. I'm happy with that. I also saw the further development of the scheme with the new blocks would be okay, but I had some concerns about the parking and also the way that the traffic moves there so close to that bridge under the railway. I was always against the further building of accommodation there, but that was thrown out some time ago, and I had a major issue with that gym, but that's gone. So I can now quite happily say, Chairman, that now that we've reflected and the developer has changed substantially this application, I now am happy to approve it, and I also move. Officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Nick. Ian
Just
Johnson, that is.
The second officer's recommendations. Thank you, Chair.
Right. I see no other hands up. I see no other comments, and unless somebody indicates very soon, I take that as having support. And no need to go to a vote. Thank you very much. Moving on, we come to 2021-01242, full land adjacent to Little Moor Farm, Lliswerni. And I think this is Ian again, isn't it?
Thank you, Chair. It is. Sorry, I've just noticed, and I noticed earlier, I'm constantly going in and out of darkness. The room I'm in has got a very small window, so if the light changes slightly outside, I become a silhouette. So apologies if that's off-putting to anybody. It might be an improvement.
I'm not commenting.
Right. So yes, this is an application for a detached dwelling and detached garage at land adjacent to Little Moor Farm in Lliswerni. This is the site shown here on the plan in front of you. The site lies within both the settlement boundary and the conservation area boundary for the village. This plan here shows the siting of the dwelling. So it's a two-storey dwelling, which I'll show you elevations of in a moment. A two-storey L-shaped dwelling and a detached three-bay garage. The construction of the garage and the dwelling would require the removal of a row of trees within the site, which I'll show you a photograph of shortly. This is the dwelling here. So it's fairly traditional in style, the pitched roof and a series of gables. And this is the garage block. You can see here is triple bay with some dormer extensions coming out of the roof plane. The main issues here for officers are that actually I can get up the conservation area appraisal. This is a plan from the conservation area appraisal and management plan for Lliswerni. The orange arrows here indicate significant views, so they're deemed to be important views across an area of open space that contribute to the character and setting of the conservation area. In particular, I'll go back to the photos. In particular, I'm just going to get the photos from the point at which those views are indicated. In particular, the openness of the space gives views across to the countryside beyond and kind of reinforces the rural setting and character of the village. Where significant views are identified in the conservation area appraisal, we have to give them significant weight in terms of protecting them where they contribute to the character of that area. In this case, officers are of the view that the removal of the trees and the construction of the dwelling here would significantly interrupt what has been identified as important views across this space, which would be damaging to the character and setting of the village. In addition to that, we have the loss of the trees, which is of equal concern. Trees within conservation areas are protected. I suppose the best way to think about the trees, in my view, is if this weren't an application for a new dwelling, it was simply an application for us to remove the trees, we would still be objecting to this because we consider that these trees contribute positively to the character of the conservation area and their removal will be damaging to it. So when we're making a decision in a conservation area, the test is, does the development preserve or enhance it? So it's a relatively high bar to get over. What it's saying is no harm. So in our view, this is harmful. The site at the moment has, whilst within the settlement boundary, it has an open character and it enables that setting of the conservation area to be read in its context. So the application is recommended for refusal. I have nothing further to add, just to clarify.
I'm sorry, I had my mic off. Christine Cave, you called it in. Would you like to speak, please?
Oh, thank you, Chair. Yes, I just obviously.
Sorry, Councillor Cave. We have I think we have a speaker on this. Would they be due to speak?
Yeah,
have we?
Yeah,
oh,
just confirm.
I apologise.
Yeah, just confirm, yes. Chair. We've got Mr. Paul Booth.
I forgot entirely. I apologise to Mr. Booth profusely. That is entirely my fault. Mr. Booth, are you there, please? Hello, can we hear you?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Same rules. I mean, I presume you saw what was happened earlier with speakers. You have 3 minutes from the moment you start speaking, and I'll let you know before your time. So carry on, Mr. Booth.
Okay. Good afternoon, Chairman and members of the Planning Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Throughout the planning process, we've actively engaged with council officers to find the right solution for the site, including 2 rounds of pre-application advice. We made significant changes to the scheme following officer feedback and appreciate the benefits of this advice to the final scheme. The planning officer has remaining concerns about heritage and trees, which we do not feel are justified. Firstly, heritage. We've lived in the village for 22 years. The site is described as tranquil. When the view is described as significant, we would question significant to whom, as the lane bordering our property is little used. There's very little footfall. Furthermore, 2 telegraph poles have recently been erected which impact on this significant view. Our heritage consultant concluded in their report that the iterative design process has resulted in a scheme that is of a size and position which would fit sympathetically into the village and conservation area. The position of the new house has been set back to retain the significant view identified in the camp. You can see from the submitted drawings, in particular the context perspective drawing, that the new dwelling wouldn't lead to a noticeable loss of views across the site and out of the village. With regard to trees, the proposal would result in the loss of 2 category B trees, classed of moderate quality, and some other lower quality trees. Our tree consultant has confirmed that none should be described as mature. We had originally hoped to build in a more central position to avoid the loss of the tree line. At the request of the council, to better reflect the current development of the village, the house was positioned to the rear of the plot. We have always wanted to mitigate any loss with new tree planting and would happily go beyond the council's 2-for-1 replanting ratio and comply with any condition which requested further landscaping detail to be approved by the local authority. On the section 106 point, a legal agreement has not been drawn up because the application was recommended for refusal. But if council were minded to grant planning permission, then this could be subject to the completion of a section 106. To conclude, if councillors support this application, they will be supporting a beautifully designed new family home using sustainably sourced materials, which would make efficient use of previously developed land, protect key views and secure beneficial tree planting.
Refusing this application would miss an opportunity to add to the area's housing stock. We respectfully urge members of the Planning Committee to grant permission for this application before you today.
Thank you, Mr. Booth. If you hang on a second while I ask if there's any points of clarification from anybody. I see none other than Christine, which I think that's her hand up to speak. In that case, thank you very much for your time, Mr. Booth. If you'd like to put your hand, if you put yourself on mute and off screen, we'll carry on with the discussion. Councillor Cave.
Thank you, Chair. I think I've lowered my hand now, so you won't have a hand left up after I speak. Yes, first of all, I should begin by stating that although I called this into committee, I do come with an open mind. I think people have spoke today about open eyes, but I often speak about having an open mind. So I haven't predetermined this application. So I do believe that I can take part in the debate. And I would ask everybody here tonight to listen to what the applicant has said and listen to officers and then make their own mind up on the back of that.
Thank you. That's that's why we're here. Right, Ian, do you want to come back and sum up?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, it's not a huge amount to add. I mean, yeah, there has been a pre-application dialogue. Within the pre-application dialogue, concerns were raised with a proposal of this kind. The application has been amended slightly, in my view, since the pre-application dialogue, not in a significant way which would overcome the concerns that we raised at pre-application stage. In terms of siting centrally or in the corner, I just want to be clear on kind of how that's interpreted. There has been no suggestion of move it to the corner side and then it will be acceptable. Undoubtedly, it is more acceptable or less harmful in the corner of the site than it would be centrally in terms of the impact on the views, but that doesn't mean it's acceptable. We still find it harmful in that location. It's a lot of this is a matter of judgment. We don't agree that there would be notional impact on the views. We think that those impacts would be quite significant in terms of the current openness of the site. And as I mentioned before, even if this were just an application to remove the trees, I believe we would still have a problem with that because I believe the trees in themselves are contribute to the rural character of the conservation area. So yeah, that's probably all I need to say as Chair.
Okay, any other comments from members of the committee? In that case, this is another one where, without any indication of people's feelings, unless anybody indicates now that they are opposed to officers' recommendations, which are to refuse planning permission.
Yes, Chair. I am against officers' recommendations.
Right, Councillor Cave, you're against. Any others? Has anybody? I mean, I'll move officers' recommendations as stands. Does anyone want to second, please?
I'll second, Chair.
Thank you. So with just one person against, indicating they're against, I can record you as voting against, Christine, and
I'd like to vote against as well.
In that case, we'll have to go. We'll go to the roll call again. I'm starting off on 4 officers' recommendations. Councillor Birch is no longer here. Councillor Bruce?
Against.
Councillor Cave, you're against, you said. Councillor Champion?
Against.
Councillor Cope? Oh, you've gone as well, yes, sorry. Councillor Drake?
For officers' recommendations.
Thank you. Councillor Ernest?
For the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Gilligan?
For officer recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Hodges?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson?
Obliged. For.
Councillor Payne?
For.
Councillor Perks?
For.
Councillor Perry?
Yeah, 4.
Thank you. Councillor Stellard?
Obliged. For.
Thank you. Councillor Williams?
4.
All right, and Councillor Wilson's not here anymore, so I have 3 against and 1, 2, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 for. So that's carried. The officer's recommendations are carried. Moving on, we come to 4 Park Road, Penarth. Councillor Ernest, I think you need to step out for the moment.
That's correct, Chairman, yes.
If you and Mark will call you back in when it's.
Yeah, that's correct, Chair. I'll give Councillor Ernest a call once.
Right.
Bear with us a bit. We just have to wait for Councillor Ernest to leave. Yep. Councillor Ernest is now left, Chair.
All right. Thank you very much, Mark. Right. I think, Stephen, you're presenting this.
Oh, indeed. Thank you. So I hope you can all see my screen. This is an application site at 4 Park Road in Penarth, which relates to a top floor flat situated in a semi-detached property that's located in the settlement boundary and the conservation area for Penarth. So the proposals have been amended. So initially the application was called in by a former member because there were concerns in respect of overlooking impacts. So very briefly, if I just drop down to the plans. So what's being proposed is currently there's a unsightly, if we want to call it that, 1950s staircase that provides access to the first and second floor flats. That staircase is to be removed, and as part of that, and to gain access to the upper floor flats, the proposal is to build a new stairwell and also a lift shaft and also extensions at first floor level. So as part of that, with removal of the existing stairwell, this will create really a sort of level platform area for the first floor flat, although effectively it's little more than a walkway. As part of the proposal, as you can see, these are the new build elements and these are the top floor elements. As part of the proposal, seeks to remove the existing dormer and replace it with a new inset sort of balcony. If I could just show you the photos, give you a little bit more context. So at the moment, this is the rear of the property where they've got this dormer in the roof. So that will be removed with a new inset, effectively almost like a dormer, but will replicate the same sort of style that you've got next door, but it'll be inset. So this is existing external staircase, which will be removed. Again, these are views taken halfway up the front garden of the property. As you can see, it's pretty well screened. This is, sorry, gone too far. This is the view from the current dormer window. As members can see, it does have quite a clear view of the adjoining occupier's rear garden. So in terms of that detail at the back, we've negotiated a lot. The original scheme proposed a projecting balcony. We weren't happy with that because we felt it would cause quite significantly greater overlooking of this neighbour's rear garden. So what's happened now is we've got an inset balcony, effectively with a shroud around, projecting shroud. That shroud will limit the angle of view, if you like, towards the adjoining occupier's rear garden. We feel to a point where the degree of overlooking would not be significantly different to what it currently is. As part of our negotiation as well, originally the scheme proposed some alterations to the front, looking to drop this window down and to provide, I believe, French doors, and also to open up this opening. We weren't happy with that as officers because I think I've got a Google Street plan, Google Street. You can see really the only visible part of this from the conservation area is the upper part of the roof. So we've negotiated those changes out as part of the proposal. They're looking to put a pitch roof over this more modern flat roof dormer on the side roof plane. We're actually quite supportive of that because I think that will probably be more in keeping with what's there at the moment. So obviously the main issues really, because it's so set back from the road, it doesn't really have an impact on the conservation area, and particularly from the back, even though the extensions are quite tall and, you know, are relatively contemporary, we feel that we can support those, again, because they're on secondary stroke rear elevations and don't really impact on the character of the area. So the main issue is the impact on the neighbours. As I said, in relation to the adjoining neighbour, the changes are considered to overcome our initial concerns in respect of overlooking, where to a point where now it's not significantly worse than the existing situation. And also we have sought some revisions of the sort of flat roof area that's resulted from the removal of the staircase in relation to the overlooking of the property to the side, which is in 2 flats. We've now negotiated that the balcony area, which is a lot wider, has now been, apologies for the definition here, it's been reduced in width to a metre, which is effectively a walkway, so it wouldn't be, we don't think that would be wide enough to actually sit on. So really, that's no worse than existing situations. That serves the first floor flat. So the recommendation is that the application is approved, subject to conditions. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. So in summary, given that it was called in by a former councillor who his objections were relating to overlooking and intrusion on the opposite, and it's given the opportunity for the applicants to amend that to meet the concerns. Are there any other comments? Does anybody else want to come in? Yeah. Can I have someone move officers' recommendations in that case?
I'll move officers' recommendations.
And short of anyone else, I'll second. Oh, thank you, Eddie. Eddie will second. Thank you. And again, unless I see indications to the contrary, I will take that as being supported by the committee. Yep, I see thumbs up. Thank you, Councillor Champion. In that case, do you want to call Councillor Ernest back for the last bits?
Yes, bear with me, Chair.
Last 2 bits. Just wait while Anthony comes back in. Oh, here he is. Welcome back, Anthony. You're still on mute.
Thank you so long as you can hear me, Chairman. All you need
we can now. Yeah.
Splendid. Thank you.
Right. Moving on to application 2022-00155, full land off Portcelli Road, Roos. This relates to a fence. Who's presenting? Ian, I think, again, isn't it?
That's right, yeah. Thank you. Here we go. Yeah, so this is an application for the part completion and part retention of a fence adjacent to Portcelli Road. I'll actually share my map system just because that plan is not the best because of the lack of any kind of obvious landmarks around it. It's this bit of land here, which is on the approach to Roos. That roundabout there is the roundabout that takes you down to Roos Point, and that's the road down to Portcelli. So it's this bit of land here. Oh, sorry, I'll get a photo of the existing first. So adjacent to a highway, permitted development rights restrict enclosures to no more than a metre. So this fence here is, I think, approximately 1.82 metres in height. As you can see from the photos, it's part completed and part sort of frame. The concern here is that whilst this isn't kind of rural lane, that kind of thing, it's a fairly wide carriageway. It's still essentially countryside around it, and the road is characterised by hedgerows and landscaping and natural features like that. We feel that the introduction of a fairly domestic-looking, close-board, 1.8 metre high fence is kind of alien to the character of the area. That's just another photo of it there. Another photo here. Either side of it, in both directions along the road, it's really just hedgerows and things like that. In the report, members might have noticed there's reference to an appeal decision on a site which we regard as similar, albeit different context, which was in Newton near Cowbridge.
We've lost you, Ian. You're buffering, Ian.
Oh, sorry. Have you got me now? Have you got me back now?
You're back now, yeah.
Okay, fine. Sorry, I was just saying that we think it's kind of similar in context to one that was refused a little while ago by committee, and that refusal was appealed by the applicant, and the planning inspector dismissed the appeal, and he agreed that this kind of fence in a otherwise kind of rural context, which is characterised by hedges and trees and things like that, natural features, this kind of fairly domestic looking fence looks visually incongruous and out of keeping. So the recommendation is to refuse the application and also to authorise officers to take enforcement action to seek either the removal of the fence or its reduction in height to 1 metre. That's because permitted development rights allow you to go up to a metre. We give them the option of removing it entirely, but we have to give them the option of reducing it to what they can do without planning permission. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Ian. Any comments from anybody? Any observations? Charles Champion, I see your mouth moving, but I can't hear you. Councillor Champion, you're on mute.
Take that away. Right. I'm with the officers on this, but just over the other side is the airport fence, so it does seem a bit strange.
Any comments? Any other comments? Nope. In that case, as no one else is commenting, Eddie.
Move officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Eddie. I'll second that. Oh, Charles is seconding.
I'll second it.
Thank you. As I can see, no indication of opposition to this. I assume that's passed then. Thank you. Officers' recommendations are carried. We now come on to the last of our applications, which is 2022-00401 full, which is 3 White House, Barry. And again, I think it's Ian.
That's right, Chair. Thank you. This is another application that's been to, the application hasn't been, another site that has been to planning committee previously, which some members will probably remember, but others obviously not. The application site is 3 White House in Barry, which is within the conservation area. It is a detached dwelling situated within a row of dwellings on the White House. When this site came to planning commission last time, it was for an extension. This is the existing house. The application that came last time was for essentially the same kind of 3D external footprint, a projecting first floor extension at the front and then extensions to the rear. The application was refused at planning committee last time. It was recommended for approval. It was refused for 3 reasons, which were the impact on the neighbouring properties, the design and visual impact on the character of the conservation area, and also relating to parking. When the application was refused, the applicant appealed, and the appeal was unsuccessful. Planning inspectors, it was a slightly unusual decision. Planning inspectors normally don't go kind of looking for different reasons to those that appeal on the decision notice. But in this case, the planning inspector was comfortable with the impact on neighbours, was comfortable with the design and visual impact in the context of the conservation area, and was comfortable with the level of parking. The inspector dismissed the appeal because he wasn't happy that one of the bedrooms in the dwellings would be reliant on only an obscurely glazed window. So their only outlook from the bedroom would be a window which, in order to protect the neighbour's amenity, would need to be obscurely glazed. So he dismissed the appeal, saying that it essentially afforded occupiers of the application site inadequate living conditions. So this new application has been submitted in an attempt to attempt to overcome that issue. So the internals have been reorganised such that this bedroom here no longer would be served by only an obscurely glazed window. It's kind of an open plan bedroom and suite here with a window here, and then the bedrooms at the rear would also benefit from non-obscured clear glass, if you like. So the application is reported back with a recommendation for approval. Officers believe that this scheme overcomes the concerns raised by the inspector, and we feel that the other issues raised last time, which the inspector was happy were not prejudicial to neighbours or conservation area or parking. We think that would be very difficult to sustain those now in the context of that appeal decision. So it's recommended for approval, Chair.
Thank you, Ian. Nick Hodges, you've got your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. My ward again. I'm not seeing a very different scheme here to what we actually turned down as a committee in the previous council. Therefore, I will reiterate my opposition to this, and I move refusal. Thank you.
Right. Given that it went to the inspectors and they
refused it.
Well, they refused it, but they refused it on their own grounds, not on our grounds. They threw out our grounds, which were the ones that we put forward as our objections.
Yeah, perhaps we've got a different inspector, Chairman.
This is possible. Ian Johnson.
Just a second, Councillor Hodges there, Chair.
Yeah. So, what are your reasons for refusal, then, Councillor Hodges?
Same three reasons as last time by committee, Chairman.
Same three reasons as last time by committee. Right, Ian.
Yeah, just to say, it will very likely be a different inspector. My understanding is that generally, when an application comes back on a similar site, it is allocated to a different inspector. However, the new inspector will have to give a significant amount of weight to the previous appeal decision. That would be a very pressing material consideration in their assessment.
Thank you. In that case, what we have effectively, if we have a motion to reject officers' recommendations on the grounds of scale of design, the proposal resulting in congruous addition to the property that would detrimentally impact on the appearance and character of the street scene and wider conservation area. 2, by reason of its scale, form, proximity to the boundary with the neighbouring property and projection past the neighbour's front elevation, the proposed extension will result in an imposing and overbearing impact on the neighbour at number 1 White House to such an extent that it would be unacceptably impact upon the living conditions of the occupiers. And 3, the proposals would result in an unacceptable demand for parking which cannot be provided on site or within the immediate street scene. If you have the papers in front of you, you'll be able to read them anyway. I think they're on page 205. No, I can't. No, they're not there. Wherever. 196 they were. If you actually have access to the papers and want to read them again. So we are voting for either for Councillor Hodges' motion to refuse or against Councillor Hodges' motion to refuse. Again, I'll start us off. I am against Councillor Hodges' motion to refuse. Moving on, we haven't got Councillor Birch. Councillor Bruce.
For.
Councillor Cave.
Sorry, Chair. Did somebody second?
Yes. Yeah, Ian Johnson did.
Oh, okay. I must have missed that. I think my reception's dipping in and out here. I'm for officers' recommendations.
For officers, so you're against the amendment.
Yes.
Right. Or yeah. Councillor Champion.
Against.
Against. Councillor Cowp isn't with us. Councillor Drake.
Against the amendment.
Councillor Ernest.
Against the amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Gilligan.
Against the amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Hodges, you moved it.
Yeah.
Councillor Johnson.
Applied for.
Yeah. Councillor Payne.
For the amendment.
You're for the amendment, right? Councillor Perks.
Against the amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Perry.
I didn't know there was an amendment, but I'm for.
The amendment is well, it's not amendment. It's for rejecting officers' recommendations.
Yeah, I'm for.
You're for rejecting, right? Councillor Stallard.
Against.
And Councillor Williams. Eddie?
Against.
Thank you. 9, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to 9 against the move to reject officers' recommendations, so that is effectively carried. We need to vote again, I'm told. Hell's bells. Right, in that case, we need a mover and seconder for recommendations, please.
I'll move officers' recommendations. Or
I'll second officers' recommendations.
Sandra. Right. Once again, we are now voting for or against officers' recommendations to approve. So I'm voting for. Rhiannon's not with us. Councillor Bruce.
Against.
Councillor Cave.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Champion.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Coop's not with us. Councillor Drake.
For.
Councillor Ernest.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Gilligan.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Hodges.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson.
An Erbin against.
Yes. Councillor Payne.
Against.
Okay. Councillor Perks.
For.
Councillor Perry.
Against.
Councillor Stallard.
Applied for.
And Councillor Williams. So that's the same numbers as last time, which is so that officers' recommendations are carried. Nick, you've still got your hand up.
Yeah, Chairman, I accept the result, obviously, and I know that's the end of all the applications. Can I just ask something procedurally for the future? Whilst we continue to be online rather than in the meetings and we having these roll calls, can I ask that they actually be taken alphabetically?
They are, apart from me.
Apart from you, Chairman, yeah.
So you'd like okay? I mean, I don't mind. I can step out and yeah, put myself in alphabetically if you want. That's fine. It's not normal, I don't think. I think normally the chair usually votes first, and then that was what was happening and all through this. Certainly, Jonathan Bird was doing that. We'll take advice on that. Thank you for that. In that case, Ian, you've got your hand up now.
I was just going to say, I mean, we don't do that in full council meetings, do we? We do it fully alphabetically. I mean,
yeah.
I don't think it makes a lot of difference, but I mean, it's.
But that has been customer practice on this committee, certainly on all online meetings. Yeah. Yeah, it's actually chair and vice chair were voting first, I think, previously.
Well, perhaps it shouldn't, Chair.
Right. Well, we'll take advice on that. And in that case, thank you all for your attendance. It's been a long meeting, and have a good evening. Thank you. Bye night.
Thank you, Chairman. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Good night all.